OG Rose here, and today we're going to be talking about a paper called Epistemic Irresponsibility with the IR in parentheses. And generally this paper is going to be talking a lot about the work of W.K. Clifford, who wrote a book called The Ethics of Belief. And generally what he argued is that if you knew there was a problem with a car and your friend asked if they could drive it and you said yes, and they drove it to their parents' house and they got there and they were perfectly fine and nothing bad happened, what Clifford wants to argue is that you would have still acted immorally because you knew there was something wrong, but you acted like there wasn't. And even if it worked out and it was okay, there was still a problem with the fact that you acted knowing that you were risking your friend's life. And so what Clifford's trying to do is he's trying to create an argument that there's a certain ethic about the intellectual life. Like there's a lot of people who say, oh, well, I'm not big into ideas, or oh, that's academic. And what Clifford wants to say is that to some degree, there is a ethical imperative to be knowledgeable. And also that if you know something is dangerous, to realize that if you don't bring it up, you've acted immorally, even if things happen to be okay. So there really is kind of, he wants to create this sort of ethic around the life of the mind. Now he goes after religion and tries to argue that it's intellectually immoral to believe in religion, but I think William James kind of counters that quite well. And I don't quite agree, but what I really do think is quite useful is the idea of epistemic responsibility. Because if you're acting on confirmation bias, if you're acting on backfire effect and you're not fighting these things and you know these things are real, then I think it is kind of useful to think of yourself as acting epistemically, intellectually immoral. If you know about all these cognitive biases, you know they're out there. Maybe you are not sure that you yourself are committing them. I mean, the whole idea is that you don't know if you yourself are committing them. But the very fact that you know about them, if you don't try to fight them, then there's some sort of responsibility you have. And I don't feel like people think that way. They kind of say, well, this is what I believe, these are my principles, this is my political leaning, and that's what I'm going to stand by. And yeah, at the end of the day, we all have to choose our first axioms, our first principles. The conservative may emphasize freedom, the liberal may emphasize equality, and at the end of the day, we're going to get down to an emphasis debate between axioms, and there's more on that on other papers. And so, yeah, there's something to be said about standing for what you believe, but at the same time, there's a difference between standing for what you believe and acting epistemically immoral in so doing, versus standing for what you believe, but also being epistemically moral. So I think it's useful to think of the life of the mind, intellectual life, as being guided by an ethical principle. I think also it creates a imperative to make sure that you're not falling into various cognitive biases in the same way that people today make, you make sure that you're not accidentally messing up somebody's life with your business, or that you don't actually run someone over when you're in your car. I mean, we all have, or you try to make sure you're not stealing something on accident while at the store. We all try to act, generally we all try to act epistemically, morally, intellectually, morally best we can, and so we really should have like an intellectual framework to do the same. And likewise, it's also intellectually immoral to misrepresent people you disagree with. It's to strawman people. There becomes if you take Clifford's idea seriously, there becomes an ethical imperative to make sure that you're understanding people you disagree with correctly, that you're not misrepresenting them, and that you're doing your best to understand them. It becomes epistemically, an epistemic means just, thought, intellectual. So it becomes there's intellectual imperative ethics to communicate your ideas clearly, to listen clearly, to learn self-skepticism, to be open to change, to not reject an idea because it's hard to hear, and the paper has a list of different things. So anyway, that's generally the paper. You can find it at ogrose.com, and thank you for your time.